traffic will travel are extremely high. And if we were to do any kind of vending along the ABC highway, we would probably recommend an area where you have to actually pull off of the highway, and carriers would not park, say for instance, in Warrens where persons park on the shoulder. The shoulder is an area that we wouldn't really want persons to be parking and carrying out that activity. So it would have to be in an area that is a little further away from the shoulder of the road, and so as to improve road safety. Right? So there is that opportunity that you can have vendors beyond that shoulder area. In terms of the areas now, like for instance, I don't want to say just Bridgetown, but the areas where owners probably own to the center of the road, in the past, vendors at one point in time came to the ministry where they would seek no objection letters to utilize the roadway to vend, but we would always have a stipulation that they must have the permission of the landowner. So that is one thing that you can look at in terms of this bill, if maybe to be incorporated in such for that activity. But again, we must still be careful in the way how we do these things, because everything has any kind of road, any kind of vending alongside the roadway will have an impact or can have an impact in terms of traffic flow, because persons will invariably park on the road and block traffic, and that will cause problems.
Do you now issue permissions formally to persons who are vending alongside the road? Let's again use the geographical zone of the ABC highway. A number of persons you would have seen vending, whether it be fruits, coconut water, vegetables, etc., eggs, all sorts of things are sold alongside the highway. Do you all ever issue any formal permissions at present?
No, that process, it came to an end. I cannot remember what year it was, but we were advised to stop. And we have stopped that for quite some time. So no vendor on the roadway would have such a permission from the Ministry of Transport and Works.
Leader of the opposition.
Mr. Boyne, morning to you. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Boyne, you still there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
How long have you been a technical officer at the Public Works?
From 2005.
A long time. Is there any, or are there any specific suggestions, recommendations which you would make to a government that is intent on facilitating vending, empowering vendors, and in that effort, accommodating them for the economic activity along the highways of Barbados, with ABC Highway, those types of highways? Is there any specific recommendations you would make as to how we could respond to a situation like that and make that possible, make it real in a meaningful way?
Well, currently in the ministry, or at least we have been for a number of years actually, we have developed a number of locations along the ABC highway where we feel that once we carry out certain infrastructure improvements, provide an area for vehicles to pull off of the highway and into a parking area, and there's a separate facility for the vendors to set up and ply their trade, but it's still close to the highway where persons can still visually see the vendors from the highway as they're passing. We believe that we have some locations that we think that vending can occur.
You have identified those locations already?
Yes, we have some areas identified. We have locations where we were looking at Warrens. We were looking at.
So where in Warrens we're talking about?
Well, we have one location at this point in time that we were looking at was the area to the north of the Massey complex alongside the road. There's that area, but then there's another area also that we were considering as an alternative, which is the area by the roundabout. This is Everton Weeks roundabout, the northeastern quadrant that is opposite First Caribbean. That open area there, we're looking at there as well. And that is in the Warrens area. We're thinking that if we can design an area where you can pull off of the highway, park your vehicle, and carry out your trade with the vendor, and then you can have easy access back onto the highway.
So it's all like vending parks, for lack of a better word.
You could say that, yeah.
So you actually pull off, the vendors are actually off the side of the road. They
Yes.
are. Yeah, okay.
Yes, but you can still see them from off of the highway.
Yeah. Apart from Warren's, which other area?
Another area we had at Top Rock, and we also have at Dayton Griffith School, that there's some open area there as well.
I beg your pardon, where is that?
Dayton River.
Dayton Griffith,
Okay, fair enough.
yeah. Yeah, and there's another location that we're looking at. This is by JTC Ramsey roundabout. That is by the Bussa roundabout, and that area that is by the new Cave Shepherd building is a park at the moment. We were looking at there's another area where we can place vendors. In fact, there are some vendors in the area already. So it is a good location we are thinking for vending.
What about further across the two-way highway, can't remember the name of it now.
Roundabout Highway?
Roundabout. Because I see some vending activity developing along there, emerging along there.
Yeah, we were looking at Bagatelle. We were working on the Bagatelle.
You weren't mandated to locate one at Bagatelle, were you?
Well, we have options, and it is part of our remit. Well, as I said, we were working on this for a number of years, so we are just exploring all options at this point in time.
Okay.
But there's a tremendous passion for it to be located at Bagatelle, so you don't worry about that. Don't let the opposition get in
No,
that.
Bagatelle is a good site. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Um,
Yeah, I do. It's happening anyhow. Eagle Hall?
No.
Talking about Eagle Hall, I wish somebody knocked down that market. And Mr. Boeing, you have any influence up there that could have that happen?
I will hold my thoughts on that one.
Chair.
You're lead the opposition. You're finished? Okay, and a few members want to speak to you, sir. First of all, Senator Alfield Wiggins is going to address you from online. She's going to ask you some questions from online. Then I have Minister Adrian Ford and then Minister Indar Weir, in that order. Please proceed, Senator Wiggins.
A very good morning to everyone. Good morning to you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to Mr. Boyne.
The technical people have to raise Senator Wiggins' volume. There you go, ma'am. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to Mr. Boyne. Good morning to everyone on the committee. I noted Mr. Boyne gave some suggestions on the ABC Highway, which is my favorite area, as Mr. Chairman knows. I was thinking when you said by Dayton Griffith, you are looking at traffic going only in one direction, especially along these highways, because if you are in a particular direction coming down to Dayton Griffith School, unless you are, regardless of where you are anyhow, you still have to go to the Kendall Hill roundabout if you really are going back to the airport. Can you consider a vending zone closer as well? Because the vending zones can be opposite each other on both sides of the highway. Do you have an issue with vending zones, let's say one at Dayton and one on the land going past Coiman, going back in the direction of the airport for traffic that is traversing both ends of the highway, rather than restricting it to just one side? I want to ask you that question first, sir. Mr. Boyne?
Hi, good morning. At present, we were currently looking at the area which is to the which side is that? That's the east of Dayton Griffith School. That area that abounds more so the Gall Hill Kingsland Road, right? So theoretically speaking, you would if you're approaching from from Koyman, you would have to make that right turn onto the Gall Hill Road to then access the onto the Gall Hill Road and then access the area. Or if you're approaching from the airport side, you would have to make the left turn onto the Gall Hill Kingsland Road and access the site. On exiting, you would have to exit onto the Gall Hill Kingsland Road, make the left turn, and go towards the the roundabout. I think by Koyman, by Kendall Hill, and then you can then go in any direction you want. We were looking at that because we were saying, well, that should take care of all directions. However, we are not opposed to looking at the vending on the other side of the road. It is, I mean, it's open area, and that is something we can investigate as well.
Particular land that you're referring to is the one on the left side opposite the Rubis gas station there at Kendall Hill. That's the one you're referring to? Because if there is a vending zone, then the traffic coming to the roundabout there would then have access to any direction. Which one were you referring to? I didn't quite get the location.
The area that I'm referring to is the area to the direct east of the Dayton Griffith School fence. There's an open area there. If you look at the junction, this is the junction that is by, this is the junction, the ABC Highway, Gaw Hill, Kendall Hill Road. It's right there. It's to, as I said, to the east of the fence, but bounded by the Gaw Hill Road. So, I mean, at that point in time, at that point, you should technically be able to access it, get to it from any direction. However, on exiting, you will have to leave via the Gaw Hill Road onto the ABC Highway, then go towards the Kendall Hill roundabout, and then from there you can then choose which direction you want. I hope that explains it better.
Okay, for now, but we'll come back to it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wiggins. Minister Adrian Ford.
Good morning to all. It's Mr. Boyne, right? Mr. Boyne, sir, good morning to you. I don't think when I'm passing the highway, I become visually impaired. I'm not certainly disabused of the conversation that is taking place this morning with my colleagues and you, Mr. Boyne, as it relates to vendors on the highway. Currently, there are a lot of vendors set up all across Barbados on the highways, whether it's coconut, fruit vending, vegetable vending, and they set up on the, we call the lay-by roads. Some people may call them layways. I don't know the term that they use, but they are the side roads adjacent to the main highway roads. And I want to say today that I don't think that persons just come and set up and start to vend because they are disobedient, they have a level of flippancy, they are churlish in their behavior. I don't think it is none of the above. I really think that they're set up because out of a social need, probably financially, there's a requirement for them to be involved in some type of entrepreneurship activity. And vending happens to be that activity of the day. And secondly, they look for high traffic areas. My thing is, and I think that this is where the policy will come into place, and the minister who has the unreserved gusto to do it is sitting in the chair, to look at a situation where we provide those commercial spaces off the layways in areas that persons can drive in to vending sites and drive back onto the highway in a way that does not affect the flow of traffic or cause any danger to pedestrian or vehicular traffic. That is the stage I think that we are at in this type of conversation, because the activity is already there. And I think that is where we are going. My question to you, though, Mr. Boyne, is as it stands, as we speak, in this moment of time, what is the procedure that your ministry use in order to remove those vendors if need be? Because I won't think that any of us in here would like to see the MTW turn up with a group of officers asking vendors to put up the things and trying to arrest anyone. What is the procedure being used if there is a danger, and how do you deal with that situation from the Ministry of Transport and Works point of view? Thanks.
I'll be honest with you, that is a point that I think I can have to defer to the permanent secretary when he comes here, because at this point in time, as I said, the ministry has not engaged in giving any permissions for vendors in a long time, but we have not taken any action to move any either. But I think that is something definitely the PS would have to answer on that one.
But Mr. Boyne, I may have misunderstood your answer to my question. I thought that my question was, do you all issue any permissions for persons who are vending alongside the highway? And I thought that your answer to that was in the negative.
As I said, at this point, no, we don't issue any permissions. We don't even issue no objection to using the road either.
So in other words, when we see people vending, and I'm mindful that this is being carried on Parliament's YouTube channel, so the ordinary person must understand what we're saying. When we see people vending alongside the highway, effectively right now, this is just sprung up organically. You go, you take up a little spot for yourself, and you do what you have to do. At present, there is no requirement for there to be any permissions to do it. It is not regulated in that way by the ministry. Is that correct?
At this point in time, it's not regulated by the Ministry of Transport and Works.
Okay, fine. Your permanent secretary has just joined you. I want to welcome
Yes.
you, Mr. Cummins, and thank you for taking time from your very busy schedule to be with us today.
Thank you very much, Chair.
In your absence, we've been talking primarily to Mr. Boyne about the issue of vending along the highway, and you would have heard the question which he was just speaking to, and I think he deferred to you. It arose from Minister Ford's quizzing of him, and he wanted, Minister Ford that is, wanted to get some clarity as to what the procedures would be in the event that you needed to move a vendor or vendors, plural, from their locations along the highway at present.
Thanks, Chair. Development goes back to the Town Country Planning Act, because vending constitutes development. But on the highway, and I'm also including the road reserve as part of the highway, that should fall directly under the remit of the Chief Technical Officer, who has responsibilities under the Highways Act. And by the way, that officer was invited to be here with us this morning. So under the Highways Act, the Chief Technical Officer can mandate the removal of vendors from along the wayside. But normally, the Chief Town Planner would serve an enforcement notice and then seek the assistance of the Ministry of Transport and Works, or the assistance of the Chief Technical Officer to have the structures removed. Now, if there is no structure, let's say for example, I go out, I buy 400 coconuts, and I decide I want to set up just a table with some bottles and sell them from the edge of the highway, on the shoulder of the highway. That is primarily a matter for the Highways Act, and by extension, the Chief Technical Officer. But based on my previous experience, there was always a very collaborative effort to ensure that both town planning and MTW were in sync. And if you would bear with me, this was done, and a specific study, land use study, was done of the ABC Highway, and vending sites were selected. Vending sites were granted planning permission, and these vending sites included sanitary facilities and other and shade, which would allow the vendors to operate in an area of comfort where motorists will divert from the highway, go to these structures, purchase their produce, and then make their way safely back onto the highway. Because as we will all agree, 80 kilometers an hour and vending on the shoulder of that carriageway spells for disaster. Fortunately, and I hope it continues like that, we have not had any major accidents, but one area that really scares me, especially on Sundays, is the area right outside of Dayton Griffith School, where cars are zipping by. People are getting into and out of their cars on the traffic side, and some brave ones also across the other side of the road, because we now have vending on both sides of the road. So in my opinion, Chair, I welcome this, this bill. I've had an opportunity to read some of it, and I think it is a step in the right direction. Vending is a very important economic activity, but as a trained land use planner, there has to be order. I don't think we can allow persons to come and set up at any and every location. And unfortunately, in Barbados, our vendors, they do two things which we should work closely with them and make sure that it is stamped out. One, they leave the waste behind, and two, they like to put up structures to claim territory. I think if we can control that, and the selection of sites on the ABC Highway was intended to deal with both of those, because it was off of the road, and provision would have been made for skips where the waste from the vending activity, namely coconut shells, could have been placed in the skips and then and safely removed. And also there will be no need for vendors to set up little shacks or little structures, because there was a well-established structure where they can carry on the activities. The motorists can drive in, park, get out, carry out their activities, back in the car, and then safely rejoin traffic. Sorry for the extended answer, sir.
No, I appreciate the extended answer, Permanent Secretary, because you have shed a little bit of light. I think that Mr. Bowen may have alluded to the land use study. Are you in a position to tell us approximately when this study was done, please? Got to stretch your memory, but this would have been done probably around 96 or 97, because at the time I was Deputy Chief Town Planner and my former boss, Mr. Lionel Nurse, was in the chair, and we would have worked closely with the then Chief Technical Officer, Mr. Cedric Archer, in setting up the ABC Highway Land Use Study. But the actual selection of the, and life is very ironic, the actual selection of the sites was done when Lionel Nurse was Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Transport, and Frank Thornhill was Chief Technical Officer, and I was Chief Town Planner. So we would have driven the full length on numerous occasions of the ABC Highway and selected those sites. Drawings were prepared. They also got planning approval, but unfortunately, we have never been able to build any of those structures. And we were very, very deliberate in the site selection, in that all of the lands chosen was under the ownership and control of the Crown. Indeed. And I must tell you, I understand, I feel your pain. While you drove the length and breadth of the highway, I actually walked it with the same thing in mind. And it really is a tale about the way in which we do things in government in Barbados, that 25 years later, we are at this stage once again, trying to reinvent a wheel that had largely been structured or designed before. Would it be correct to say then that after having done the land use study, planning permissions were actually obtained for some of the sites that were looked at that time?
Yes, Chair. Planning permissions were obtained for some of the sites.
Fine. And are you in a position to identify, or were those, I don't know if you heard Mr. Boyne. Mr. Boyne had pointed us to some sites. I'm not sure if these are the same sites, but do you know off the top of your head those areas along the highway that were granted planning permission? I ask that simply because I want to be, let me just quote the draft bill. The minister, on consultation with the National Vending Committee, may by order designate its vending zone for the purposes of this act. It is the intention of this minister to treat very broadly to the development of vending and vending zones. So if there are some that have already gotten planning permission, it allows us then to move swiftly towards establishment. We ain't gonna wait on planning permission, we got that already, unless that has lapsed. So guide me, please, sir.
Sure, Chair. Start with your last point first. Unfortunately, those permissions would have lapsed because more than 5 years would have passed, and I think we would have done those. As a matter of fact, this was done specifically to end as all part of the World Cup planning. So World Cup was back in 2007. So that planning permission would have lapsed. But those sites were, I refer to that area as Graham Hall. This is to the immediate south of the Ministry of Agriculture. There was right off of that roundabout, there would have been a road developed. As you come into the roundabout, you would have gone off into the vending area, and when you complete your business, you would have rejoined the vending area.
That is on the open area of land on the right-hand side if you're going down the hill.
Right-hand side if you're going down the hill, that's correct, Minister.
Right.
Coming up from there and headed up the hill and then to the Garfield Sobers roundabout, where if you make the left, you go to Rendezvous. There is an area in there which is now being used for the valeting of vehicles. That was the second site chosen because that land was also under the ownership of the Crown. It used to be beautified some years ago by the NCC. As we leave there and head along what is commonly known as Wildy, we would make the turn by the gas station and then over the hill by the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic and make our way to the Emancipation Statue.
Right.
And to the immediate left there, where there's now the Starbucks and the iMart, that open area, we utilize some of that area, but we also bore in mind that on Emancipation Day on August 1st, that when the Barbadians gather to pay tribute and homage to our ancestors, we made sure that we left a sufficiently large area that would not inhibit that activity. So as a result, that facility was placed at the northernmost end of that open strip, where there is already an existing access to rejoin traffic on the highway. So you would have come in on what is now the iMart on the Starbucks side, or if you were already on the highway, you can easily make the left turn and come in. And then from there, we proceeded north.
Don't go so fast yet. Don't
Sorry.
go so fast yet, because at that particular spot, there is a little bit of vending taking place there now. As you put it, just before you turn in to go to Starbucks, there's some people who do some business right there on the corner.
Right, but that was not the site, because what happens is that those persons who do the vending there, people who are traversing that road, let's say, for example, you're leaving LESC on your way to the Emancipation Statue, those people that you will see there on the left just before you go into Starbucks, that was not the intended area, because when persons stop there, they impede the free flow of traffic. So you were turning, you were making the left turn there and going inside, and actually your activity would take place parallel to the ABC highway.
Can I ask you at this point, just because I'm going to let you continue, but I just want to get some clarity from you, because you've got a lot of experience in planning. How difficult would it be, having gotten permissions for certain sites before, to have those permissions reactivated, for want of a better way of putting it?
I obviously can't speak for the chief town planner, but I don't see any reason why those permissions cannot be revalidated
Revalidated.
when a new application is submitted, because the requisite studies were undertaken, and the agency responsible for the traffic and the traffic movement, the Ministry of Transport and Works, or the Ministry of Public Works, as was it then nomenclature, we being town planning had worked very closely with that agency, and that was chosen. All of those sites were jointly chosen.
Okay, fair enough. I myself had noted that site as a potential one, so I am heartened by what you're saying to me, and the necessary follow-up work will be done. So please proceed. You leave there, and you're heading now.
You're headed north
towards Warrens.
North and west towards Warren, and at the Waterford roundabout. And pardon me, I should remember the correct names, but at the Waterford roundabout, where you go left the Commermere and right the Huddersfield turning, there is an old building there called the Comery, and as you
on the left-hand side.
On the left-hand side. So
Right.
Persons would have made the left out of the roundabout, and then the first right as you head along what is now referred to as the Waterford Boulevard. You would have then made the right along onto an existing road, which was actually the old highway. And right now it is beautifully planted with some miniature breadfruit and some other. It's very well landscaped. And there was an area in there that had been selected where that activity would have, the vending activity would have taken place, and then persons would have been safely able to rejoin traffic.
And there's already infrastructure there, because that road, there's a road that runs parallel
Yes,
to
correct.
the highway.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. There's already infrastructure there. The intention when we did the site selection was to ensure that we remove the danger of pedestrians coming into conflict with fast-moving traffic. Hence the reason why such time was taken to ensure that there were properly designated parking spaces and that the turning movements would have been easy, because we understand how the Barbadian operates. We know that persons would want to pull over on the shoulder and try to walk down the little swale and then get their things and drive back and then go back to the car and try to rejoin the traffic. And the intention was to make that as difficult as possible, because again, merging in traffic that is traveling at 80 kilometers an hour is fairly tricky. You have to you have to be very, 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 very careful. And then the last site, sir, was there was a site at Warrens, but that is no longer available, because that is now the home of Digicel. But there used to be a green strip between the mahogany trees, which are directly behind or to the direct south of the First Caribbean International Bank, right back to Simpson Motors. There used to be a green area in there that was preserved for beautification. And that site was identified as a possible site for Warrens. But in order to get to that site, you would have gone to the roundabout at Warrens and made the turn as if you're going up to Redmond's Village, and then make the turn as if you're going into Simpson Motors. The only thing is, instead of going into Simpson Motors, you would turn onto the old Highway 2A and then drive to your vending site, and then repeat that journey in order to get back on and rejoin the traffic. So you would have rejoined the traffic, made a left turn, come into the roundabout, and then from there you can choose which direction you would go.
Okay. Your former colleague, now retired Permanent Secretary Reid, and I would have spent a little time in Warrens trying to identify another site. And I will not identify that site now, because I don't want the proprietors to start to see dollar bills in their eyes. But what I would want to do is to have a conversation with you more privately, and perhaps we can organize a visit to that site with your technical people so that the necessary advice could be given on the way forward with respect to warrants, because it is obviously an important area for the continuation of vending in Barbados.
Sure, Chair, at your convenience.
Now, are there any other requests for the floor from any other members of the committee? No? Okay. Permanent Secretary and Mr. Durant, sorry. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Mr. Prescott, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everybody. How long has passed since the expiration of the validation of these specific locations? And just thinking in terms that everything will remain fixed, so the chances are that in locations that we had agreed upon some time ago, the chances are that conditions around the specific location might change, and therefore I guess we may have to revisit actually not just the approvals then, we may have to revisit the locations to make sure that all physical conditions remain the same now as they were when the specific locations were valid.
Yeah. Your question is a fair one. When I toured the highway to identify sites, that's how I became aware of the fact that some of this work had already been done. I didn't know it was 25 years ago at PS, but I became aware because some members of your staff alerted me to the fact that some of this work had been done previously. The fact of the matter is that...
Chair, if I may, just for clarity, the 25 years relates to the ABC Highway Land Use Study.
Right.
But those sites were actually selected between 2005 and 2006. Okay.
So that there are some places, for example, I'm just trying to assist Mr. Prescott. The Warrens example you gave, I'm sure you would agree, PS, that remains much the same today as it was back then. The Graham Hall example.
Graham Hall remains the same, but I do appreciate the concern of Mr. Prescott, because he's correct. Like, for example, at Rendezvous, there is two business activities going on there. I don't know if the land has been leased by the Ministry of Housing, but certainly the area that would have been identified cannot exist with those two activities which are currently taking place.
Agreed.
And Haggett Hall and Comery, we would be able to carry out the development at Haggett Hall and Comery as previously planned. And as you correctly said, sir, you have to do a completely new search for a site at Warrens.
Right. So that we have some ammunition to work with. It is just a question of now trying to drive this process forward. Minister Prescott, you had anything else? I wanted PS to get now your views on the structure of the vending zones along the highway. Ideally, we would have a set of circumstances similar to what exists at Graham Hall, where we would have vast acreage of land to be able to create a zone. But if you use, for example, the front of Dighton Griffith School, obviously there's considerable restriction in terms of what is now available, and it may have some implications for the width of the playing facility at that school. Much of the land there is owned by the Crown. In your judgment, do you think it is a reasonable thing to have a shoulder off of the highway where one pretty much exits the lane, left lane on the highway, you ride onto a parallel shoulder that allows you to do the business that you wish to do by way of procuring whatever you wish to procure from the vendors, and then rejoin the highway as you go forward again? Does that type of construct seem to make sense to you?
Chair, I think we will have to look at that type of construct very, very carefully, because the challenge there is, even if we are able to um, pull the fence back onto the playing field by maybe 10, 15 meters, the challenge is traffic rejoining the moving traffic on that lane headed west, because you're then asking persons to go from zero to join traffic at that point, because I don't see the potential for any slip lane of 300 to 400 meters that would allow you to generate a volume of speed at least 40, 50 kilometers that you can then safely integrate into the traffic, because of the housing construction, which is currently on the way to the immediate west of the Dayton Griffith playing field. So, Chair, I think that is going to be a very difficult site. I know my colleague engineers would say that anything can be designed, but as a planner, I'd be very concerned with that in terms of conflicts. And another thing that we looked at, and by we I'm speaking of former permanent secretary nurse and former chief technical officer Thornhill, when we selected those sites, we looked at the possibility, and of course we hope that it's something that would never occur, but the event of a motorist losing control and crashing into the vending activity. And that was one of the things that led us to try to find sites which were somewhat removed from the moving traffic. But Dayton Griffith is a particularly difficult location, and to be quite fair and honest, I would not want to reduce the playing field there by 10 to 15, pushing that fence back 10 to 15 meters, because it appears to me as if it is also used as a community playing field, and I think we need to push the concept of community playing fields. When we looked at the Dayton Griffith site, because of the heightened activity that took place there, we drove, as I said, we started from the airport, and the only solution we could have found for the Dayton Griffith vendors was to move them to the Graham Hall location, because there was no other place on the ABC highway where we could get traffic safely off of the highway, set up a vending facility, and then get traffic safely back onto the highway. And if you traverse from Dayton Griffith through the roundabout, the next open area is that area which will be to the east of the vet, and the west of Briar Hall. But that is a fairly significant depression, and which serves as a retention pond, because it takes and retains a significant amount of water off of the ABC highway. So we were restricted in terms of finding an alternate site for the Dayton Griffith vendors outside of Graham Hall.
It may be worth a site visit, PS, but we can organize these things after this stage has been passed.
Sure.
Because even as you speak, I had done some quiet consultation with members of the committee who like me, did not necessarily, I don't want to say we didn't share, but did not appreciate the extent of the challenge that you were raising. But enough of that. I believe that Senator Holder has indicated a request to speak with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all those in the outer room. I quite, Mr. Chair, enjoyed that presentation from PS Cummins, and to note the work that was done by the ministry in the past, and I commend the PS and his team for that. And I'm wondering, Chair, beyond the presentation made relative to the ABC Highway, if there's been any other research done or assessment done on the other 7 highways or any of the secondary roads for that matter, that would inform this committee as we look in the near future at the whole issue of the vending zone. So, in short, Chair, has there been any similar work done on any of the other 7 highways beyond the ABC highway?
Good morning, Senator. Thanks for the question. I am not aware of any extensive land use study done on the other highways, but I will be quick to say, or hasten to say, that the physical development plan also recognizes vending as a very important economic activity. And there are areas along the other highways, like for example, you have corridors along Highway 1, you have corridors along Highway 7, where some activities can take place. I think something that we need to look at in Barbados is having temporary vending sites. So it's good that the law has identified a vending zone, but I think we can have temporary vending sites. Like for example, the Esplanade, and I'm speaking now of we have the Esplanade in Fitz Village, we have the Esplanade along Highway 1 at Hastings. These are areas that can be used for vending for specific periods. What we need to ensure, one, we do not allow persons to erect permanent structures. Two, we have the time set, designated times. I've seen in some European cities, but especially in Paris, sometimes from 9 in the morning until 1 p.m., they will close the street. It becomes a designated vending zone because it's in an area of heightened economic activity, because vending thrives when you have a lot of people moving. But at 1 o'clock, when you pass that area at 1:30, you would never know that vending took place there between 9 and 1. I've said all of that to say we have areas along the other designated highways that we can use that can take the activity off of the actual carriageway or shoulder. And Spring Garden, the vending setup at Spring Garden is a perfect example of that, and that is also an activity that was planned.
Thank you, Permanent Secretary. Are there any more requests for the floor? Well, P.S., I see no more requests for the floor. I want to just ask one other question, and that perhaps is of those members of your delegation who are connected to planning now. Well, you yourself have that background. Part of what we envisage for the vending committee, the vending zones, is obviously the introduction of the amenities. We want to have the running water and so on. The question that I ask of you is, do you envisage a significant degree of difficulty in those zones that you have already pointed us to? No, Chair. They having access to running water, certainly on the ABC sites that we would have looked at. There was very easy access. The good thing about it is we use all existing infrastructure, so to be able to have a water connection would not be difficult at all. And as I was saying to one of my colleagues earlier this morning, a former permanent secretary, Mr. Weeks, we did this long before even the first SARS, furthermore now COVID. So sanitary facilities are even more important now than back then. So therefore, we must have that facility, and we must also ensure that we have bathroom facilities for the vendors. So I don't see any difficulty in
having running water and to be able to put up those facilities. I think the biggest challenge is to education for the vendors, and I mean education in terms of why the facility, how to use the facility. And if the question is asked why I've mentioned that, I will use Spring Garden as an example. Spring Garden is a design and purpose-built facility for vending. The vendors were happy, they moved down there, but then a couple months after, you saw some of them complain that people were not coming, and they decided they want to go back up to Cheapside. Yes, there is a lot more foot traffic at Cheapside, but the ministry again was instrumental because the transport board runs a specific shuttle on Saturdays, starting from 8 in the morning until I think 6 or 7 in the evening, to transport people to Spring Garden, because we all know that everybody does not have access to a car. So therefore, you need to make provision for those persons who do not have cars. So as I said, I'm in full support of the vending zones. I think we can safely select those vending zones and ensure that the development is orderly, and everyone will be happy. But we must make sure that we control the vending within the facility and do not allow it to come outside of the facility. Those of us who are old enough to know that in the old Fairchild Street, you walked across the bridge, you went down the steps, and then in those days we called them hawkers, we saw all the vendors there. What happens now is that the vendors have moved themselves now onto the bridge, where they have impeded the free flow of the pedestrian traffic, so that they try to get to the customers first. And when you find that, the vending zone has a linear extension, sometimes with no limit. So I think those are the kind of things that we really need to control, and to show them that as vendors, they will be able to make a decent living, and as this bill will ensure that vending is decent economic activity, and it is historically steeped in our lifeblood and our cultures and traditions. So vending is a part of us. And when you see the size of vending facilities in a lot of African countries, Senegal, Kenya, it is amazing and it is beautiful. But the challenge is to have persons in a safe space and to maintain that order once they have left.
Thank you, PS. You really have demonstrated some almost encyclopedic knowledge of the structural issues which are critical to support this endeavor. And as I indicated to you, I will take you up on your generous offer, and we can do a visit with your minister to some of the areas that we are looking at, both the ones that have already benefited from planning permission and the ones that we propose to utilize as we go forward. But we can set the date for that in due course. To you and your team, I want to thank you, sir. Hold on a minute, Mr. Prescott.
I don't know if this would be if this would be relevant to where we are at present, but I kind of extrapolate from the conversation that the element of time is a major void in the legislation, and I seem to I'm a little bothered about, as we continue to expand commercial activities across the island, giving certain types of businesses the freedom of opening 24 hours. We need to apply time, that kind of freedom. If we are talking about equality, we need to apply that kind of liberty to vendors as well. I know that on special occasions, vendors have to apply for license to operate, and again, after a certain period, I don't know if at present a vendor is allowed to open like from 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning till 5 in the evening, and then after a certain time they must close. But if we're fully integrating vending into the business environment in the manner that we seem to be suggesting that forms the ethos of the whole arrangement, I feel that we need to at least spend some time focusing on time. Well, I am not almost saying unlimited time, so to speak, as a major variable of concern for me. And I was expressing the same view.
Fair observation. Fair observation. The Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, you wanted the floor?
Yes, Chair. Just on the same issue, there is provision for the permit system for occasional vending. So I will just remind the committee that the occasional vending is supposed to be to allow persons to conduct vending during a fair or farmers market, festival, carnival, or cultural, entrepreneurial, religious, or recreational event. So it does contemplate that kind of organization, but then in relation to what the PS was speaking to, that is something that perhaps you may need to explore a little more. The policy would have to be articulated a little more so that we can incorporate it in the bill if you so choose. Thanks.
Mr. Prescott and PS, I like UPS, have been very touched and moved by what I saw in Africa with respect to vending. On this question that Mr. Prescott raises with regard to time and it going on into the night, that was one of the things that most impressed me, coming from that sad place that they call the door of no return. Going back to the hotel where I stayed, there were a number of cities that we would have passed through, towns that we would have passed through at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the night. And vending was a thriving, teeming. I said this on the floor of the House when I piloted this bill. It was places were teeming with activity, families out together. You can see mother with children and so on at 8, 9 o'clock in the night in a vending type environment. And they were not there only as vendors, they were there to participate as people who went to purchase from vendors and fruits and drinks, etc., food and so on. I see no reason why the vending zones should not be properly equipped. This is an age where we have the photovoltaic lighting. It is an age where we already make provision at occasional vending opportunities for lighting to be brought in, run off of generators in this particular regard. But I think if we're setting up vending zones, we need to do it holistically and so as to allow for not only the running water and the bathrooms, but also the lighting, and to make it as conducive as possible for it to be an all-day experience. So for me, I think gone hopefully forever are the days where we say to people that you can't work beyond a certain hour. In fact, PS, now that I say that, it raises another question in my mind that I had actually forgotten. The question, PS, of what happens now on the highway. Are you in a position to assist me here? I am told by the vendors I have interfaced with, many of them, that some of the challenges they have with, say, for example, coconut shells being left on the road until the next day, and in some cases, the day after, because I didn't come and work the next day for whatever reason, so the shells remain there, is that you can't move the shells after a certain time because disposal of them is not possible. Is there, in your experience, any veracity to that submission? Your mic is off, sir. I still not hearing him. I think that's better.
Are you hearing me now?
I'm hearing you now.
Yes, I think the SBRC facility, which takes the coconut shells, I think that closes at a specific time. But I don't accept that argument because they can still load it onto the truck or put it in a skip. While you may not be able to dispose of it the same day, we can't support leaving it on the side of the road. It's very unsightly. So if logistically that is something that we need to look at.
The permanent secretary is in need of technical support, please, because he's on a very important point, and we're not being able to hear him. Okay, while the technical folks assist in the other room, what I will do, P.S., we will come back to you, but in the interim, I will ask Minister Cummins to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I want to start first by commenting on the point made by Mr. Prescott in terms of time. I too would want to support the treatment of vending as a day to night experience. I think you, Minister, would have been the one who pioneered the concept of festive Fridays and the night markets in the area of Pelican Village. And even if you were to go well beyond, you don't even have to go as far as the African continent, but in Jamaica, for example, if you can go to the downtown boardwalks now, you have both day and nighttime activity. And I think one of the key things, especially as it relates to the city of Bridgetown, has been the attempt to revitalize Bridgetown, to bring life back into the city, and in so doing, bring people back into the city. And so by creating that opportunity where people can actively go, and again, the vending zones, when we talked about it earlier, I believe it was on Wednesday, we discussed the possibility of treating to where I could procure food items, where I could go for craft, where I could go for pottery, those kinds of things. If we have that vibrant, thriving night market environment, I believe it adds value, certainly from a tourism perspective in terms of things to do, but it also integrates into the psyche of the Barbadian culture, that I can do my shopping at night, even though I've been at work or in other activities during the course of the day, and it's something that I very much support. The question of the highway and coconuts, I think, Chairman, that is something that I'm hopeful the Permanent Secretary can have resolved when he comes back on to the call and give us some advice on how it can be treated to, because it also raises the question, Chairman, of not just the removal of the coconut shells and how unsightly it is, but I know that we have had an ongoing national fixation with a single issue, that issue being COVID, but that does not mean that we are still not treating to issues of dengue and mosquito-borne illnesses. And it is a real challenge to continue to have coconut shells left on the highway to accumulate, especially during the rainy season when we are having mosquito-borne issues, because they then become vectors. But more importantly, Chairman, I think also when dealing with the question of vending on the highways, there has to be an accompanying code of conduct that attaches itself to that particular vending zone. Mr. Chairman, I am concerned each time, especially when I pass certain areas of the ABC highway, that you may have 3 or 4 or 5 vendors adjacent to each other selling the same things, particular coconuts, and trying to get the attention of drivers and cars passing by. They're bobbing and weaving in between the coconuts, attempting to handle their wares out into the road. There are Barbadian drivers who, for some inexplicable reason, Chairman, find themselves in a position where they are willing to stop on the highway in order to purchase coconuts, coconut water from vendors on the highway. And so it creates a real hazard both for vendors bobbing and weaving in between traffic, darting across the highway, trying to get people's attention, and Barbadian drivers doing what I have just described in the most dangerous of fashions and stopping on a highway where there is to be no stopping. So I would want to support the designation of the zones, yes, but I would want to ensure that there is adequate enforcement of an appropriate code of conduct that manages that vending in a way that keeps everyone safe, vendors, drivers, and of course consumers equally.
Fair enough, and thank you, Minister. On the latter point, I am sure we'll have an opportunity to come back to that when we have the relevant market managers come to give evidence in a few minutes. Let me say to you, though, that I fully agree with what you said before. There are some vendors who I have encountered who not only say, but I have then double-checked, they have robustly disassociated themselves from the practice of leaving coconut shells on the highway. So I wouldn't want us to paint with a broad brush. There are obviously some, however, who need to still be worked with and persuaded to the merit of the points that you have made. Because, as I've said to them myself, we are fighting two battles at the same time. On one hand, we are fighting the COVID pandemic, and then on the other hand, we are spending a lot of time, money, and effort on trying to deal with the vector-borne illnesses. And whether it is the mosquitoes or the vermin that come from leaving coconuts unattended, it is a problem that we have to treat too. We were trying to see if we could locate Minister Ford, but until he comes back, is Permanent Secretary P.S., are you with us again?
Can you hear me, Chair?
I can hear you clearly now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, P.S. Cummins. Now, where you left off, well, actually, perhaps what you should do is just restate much of what you said, because we lost you on more than one occasion. So,
okay. As it relates to the removal of the coconut shells from the highway, if the proposal or the remodeled proposal of having designated sites for vending on the highway, if that is adopted, then the unsightly coconut shells that we currently see on the highway, that will be a thing of the past. Because, as I said, proper garbage disposal facilities were put in place in the form of skips. So as you cut the coconut, you throw it in the skip, and then the truck comes, hooks up the skip, and takes it and takes it away to the recycling facility. And we all know the benefits of coconut fiber and those things. If we do not have those designated sites, then regrettably, I think what we see now is unfortunately going to be with us, and that creates numerous problems. I have to agree with the Minister of Tourism 100%, because it exposes us to the dengue threat, the Zika, and all the other diseases carried by mosquitoes. So I think that's something that should not be any significant challenge for us. I think, as I come back again, I say education. If we can point out to persons that the need for cleanliness, the need for order, and that can be understood. I agree with her that you must have spacing, but not spacing on the shoulder of the highway as it exists. I think there will be more than enough space for the vendors within the facility and on the perimeter of the facility, because the facility, as it was designed, was not intended to contain the vendor within that facility. The facility was designed with the bathrooms and the running water for the vendors to be able to utilize, but the vending activity was actually going to take place on the outside of the facility, but allowing for the free movement of the traffic. But as Mr. Prescott said, I'm sure there's need to revisit it, because a significant 15 years is a long time, and that is the time that has elapsed. But Chair, if you would permit me, while I have access to the mic, I must pick up on two things I had forgotten One, in the proposed amendment to the physical development plan, it's back in 2017, and I know some work is being done on it now. That document, as a policy, because as we know, it has to be approved, while it's not law, it has to be approved by both houses of parliament, sought to establish at farms or persons who have agricultural plots, to allow them to establish small areas where they could sell their produce, pushing the whole concept of the farmers market, also fitting in with the concept of health and wellness in terms of getting people to eat, getting persons to eat more healthy. So as a result, the farmer does not now have to go through the whole process of putting the things in the car and carrying them to a particular location. They have the option of setting up something on their property where they can sell where they can sell their produce. That's one. And two, as it relates to vending and after hours, I fully support after hours vending. As a matter of fact, Historic Bridgetown and its garrison was approved by UNESCO in 2011. At the time, I was the site manager for the site and also the chairman of the local World Heritage Committee. And on many occasions, we made recommendations that we need to utilize the benefits of the well, it doesn't swing anymore, it lifts now, the lift bridge. What we had said is that the last Friday of every month, we should have a designated zone from the Independence Arch where you can have activities ongoing. You can utilize certain areas of the boardwalk. Of course, you'll have to close it off to traffic. But you can have that as an experience where persons will see the bridge lift. And then when the bridge comes back to its original state, you have an area there where persons can be vending and you can have people walking up and down and have a significant amount of activity. I hope that as we move into the development of the Hyatt and those other hotels in that area, that is an activity that we can see come alive, because that will provide so many opportunities for our vending community. It is also a safe and wholesome space. It can spill over all the way back to Heroes Square, and that can be a safe area where persons can walk. They can, enjoy coconut water, Morbi, all the other local things that we have and enjoy. And we are not trying to do that to fight against Oistins or Baxter's Road and the other areas, but it also gives another layer of activity that we can use. And the good thing about it is sometimes there's funding available by UNESCO to help you with what they refer to as that intangible heritage, because the landship and the tuck ban and the indigenous drinks and things like that, you do get small grants to deal with those things. So I would hope that the Ministry of Culture will pick up on that. And also it gets the younger Barbadian, and maybe the older Barbadian too, to see the bridge lifting. And it is unique. The only other place that I'm aware in the Caribbean area, now I've stretched out and brought the ABC Islands in, is Curacao, where they have a bridge that lifts. But I think we have an asset that we need to utilize. And I said Ministry of Culture, but I think the Ministry of Tourism also needs to look at these kind of opportunities where we can then bring some life back to our historic city. And as people walk around, you never know, in time the stores may open a little later.
I fully agree with you. I'm sure that the Minister of Tourism does too. I must tell you that the closing off of the road was the part of the Festive Friday concept, and I can see no reason why this other suggestion ought not to be treated in similar vein. I hope that the day will come when we get back to the Festive Friday concept. I know it's not possible now, but equally, once we can again be able to socialize and circulate and do the things that make us what we are, who we are, These are, I think that is really the empowering environment for the vending community. And obviously, it works for those people who are our visitors, because we have a very special city, and it can't be as special as it could be otherwise if we have a bridge that nobody can see being swung or lifted, or if we have fountains that nobody can see working, and that type of thing. But these are things that can and must be fixed. Minister Ford, I think that was made to understand that you may wish to make an intervention with respect to the SBRC closure, impacting as it does on the ability of some vendors to get their coconut shells, etc., from the highway to the dump in an appropriate time, on Sundays in particular, weekends in particular.
Based on the information given to me, SBRC is open specifically for coconut vendors, because that is the cell that will deal with the composting, and the area that will be dealing with the recyclable material from that coconut deposit. And I must tell you that they have assured me that the opening time on Sunday runs from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. every single Sunday, once a Sunday exists in the land of the dear Lord.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I have no doubt that much of this is going to be about proper management of the vending zones and enforcing the regulations and bringing order to what has really been an environment that organically was created and unfortunately was not allowed to develop in a very structured way. It is really a demonstration of the inherent creativity of our people. It has to be facilitated, but as we heard from Barvin themselves, it runs counter to the interests of the vendor if the regulatory environment is not there, because then chaos will break out and nobody wants to be part of chaos. PS and team.
Mr. Chair, I know PS Cummins had indicated that the trucks could actually collect the coconut shells and hold them until Monday. That is where the concern came in, and most of the truck drivers were saying at one time that sometimes during the Sundays they have other things to do, and they don't have enough trucks that they can put the coconut shells on and wait until Monday in order to deliver them to SBRC. So I know that SBRC at one time closed the landfill because they were cutting back expenditure. And I'm hearing from you now that the opening hours is now 3 to 6. So obviously the trucks that are collecting the coconut shells will have to collect it in the afternoon and get it to SBRC between 3 and 6 o'clock. So that has to be communicated to the vendors and the truck drivers very clearly. And I don't think it was ever fairly vented. So the truck drivers and the vendors will have to know that. And I believe if that is done, it's unlikely that we will have the backing up of the coconut shells, especially during the Sunday until the Monday morning.
With your permission, Chair, and through you, I would undertake to ensure that this information is fully ventilated in the public domain so that those persons involved in this type of activity would not be disadvantaged. I would undertake to do that.
I am much obliged. PS Cummins and team, unless my colleagues on the committee have any further requests for the floor, and I am not seeing any such request at this. Oh, here, Senator Wiggins. I beg your pardon. Floor is yours, ma'am. Senator Wiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back to the question of permissions and licenses for vendors. I think I heard earlier that at the moment, especially as we know along the ABC highway, persons are just setting up arbitrarily. Is there any, specifically to the PS, any action in the future for all the vendors now who are setting up along the highway to be licensed in the new vending zones? That's question number one. And question number two, as it relates to the Warren's location, right opposite the Mansur building on the left-hand side as you're going back to the bell, I think that might have been identified earlier as a location. So for the Warrens area. So can we revisit that opposite the Michael Mansur building, if you're going to put there as a vending zone, and the whole question of licenses for vendors?
I'll allow PS Cummins to speak to the second part of your question. If you go, Senator Wiggins, to clause 12 of the bill, you'll see that the proposed areas that could be vending zones are enumerated. They include beaches, esplanades, fish landing sites, gardens, parks, public markets, and they can be extended by the minister with responsibility for small business development. I must tell you that this particular minister is of the view that vending along the highways should be encouraged to continue, and there will be vending zones created, which is why I taxed PS Cummins so extensively on the land use survey along that highway, because I do believe that we have an opportunity to foster a level of entrepreneurship in a very structured way along the highways of Barbados. Having said that, yes, to answer your question directly, there will be a requirement for vendors within the zones to be licensed. And the truth of the matter is that if you are not vending within a zone, you will be running afoul of the legislation anyway. So it stands to reason that in accordance with clause 16, a person who engages in vending in a place other than a vending zone shall be subject to the payment of an administrative penalty. We wouldn't want people to be forced to pay an administrative penalty, so we will have to license them and give them their permissions to do what we want them to do. P.S. Cummins, are you in a position to speak to the second limb of Senator Wiggins' question, please?
Thanks, Chair. I think the area to the immediate east of the First Caribbean facility, or as I usually refer to it, immediately opposite the grove of mahogany trees on the eastern side, that can be looked at. But I think if I take my memory back to my former position, that site always had specific problems in terms of getting traffic into it and out of it because of its specific location, and then you have traffic coming from St. Thomas into the roundabout. I think that may pose some challenges for a vending site where you're going to have so much activity, in terms of vehicle movements in and out. But it can be looked at. I think there are many other options in Warrens. Unfortunately, there's land in Warrens owned by by the Crown, by the state-owned enterprise, the National Housing Corporation. But there are other areas in Warrens that can be facilitated for the vending. It's going to be off the highway, but it would not be any significant inconvenience to persons who want to go and make their purchases. And we will notice that the highway going up from Green Hill, that's Highway 2, Jason. Highway 2 going up from Green Hill, that the vendors have taken over that facility, and the crosswalk that we placed there for persons who are attending the polyclinic and coming over and doing other business, they now stroll across there and stop the traffic and then carry out the necessary activities. So that's one of the things I was referring to when I spoke of the order. And I think, again, as long as we provide the necessary education, create the vending zones, then, and encourage persons to go in there. I don't think you want to use the big stick or a hammer, but I think you just need to continue to use moral suasion and public education, because it's not only the vendor we have to educate, but we also have to educate the customers. Because if I do not buy from someone who is in the crosswalk, and collectively we do not buy from someone who is in the crosswalk, that vendor is going to leave the crosswalk because they realize they're not getting any sales there. So this is a major undertaking, but I think it is certainly worth it, and our ministry, we will play our role in a very significant way to ensure that this is a success.
Thank you, PS. And I want to thank you and all the members of your team. This is a perhaps underutilized part of the parliamentary process, and it is nonetheless very invaluable, however, because it enables us as legislators to get a full grasp of the physical environment and circumstantial environment within the context within which we are trying to frame the legislation, and to be responsive in a realistic way to some of the challenges on the ground. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I reiterate my commitment that I will reach out to you in the soonest possible time, and your minister, so that we will be in a position to physically do the necessary visits to spots along the highway, and anywhere else that might be necessary. So at this point, colleagues, we have waiting Mr. Eric Lewis, the public markets, from the Public Markets Fisheries Division, Ms. Melanie Holder, also from that division, and Vernell Nichols from the Barbados National Union of Fisherfolk. And obviously this gives us an opportunity to focus on the fisheries sector with respect to the business of vending. P.S. I would want to thank you and to point out to you that within an hour's time or so, we will have lunch available. I suspect that you may no longer be on the premises, but there is an invitation to you to join us in the event that you care to come back. Certainly, what we're going to ask you now is to just demit the facilities that you now hold. We will do the necessary preparation so as to be faithful to the protocols and allow those others who are waiting on the outside to take the place that you now have. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, on behalf of my colleagues who are here and myself, and also on behalf of the other technical members of staff and the Minister. We certainly thank you for this opportunity, and we hope that we've been able to bring some valuable information to this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, we will now, I propose that we take a 5-minute break. So could I just have a motion that we suspend for 5 minutes, please? Minister
Motion
Ford?
to suspend for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. We are accordingly suspended. All right, 5 minutes has to be 5 minutes. It can't be 20. So, Madam Clerk, are we in a position to? Are we in a position to? Yeah. Okay, can we come to order, please, colleagues? It is my understanding that we have been joined by some other invitees. I would want, however, before I go into that, to ask Madam Clerk at the table that an expression of gratitude be conveyed in writing to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry responsible for Transport Works and Water Resources and his team. It is very significant that a Permanent Secretary, no less, takes time to come to share in the way that he did. And equally, you could take the opportunity, please, to convey my profound sense of regret that the Chief Technical Officer was unable to join us on this occasion. We have with us in the other room Mr. Eric Lewis from the Markets Division, Fisheries, Milanese Holder, Public Markets, Fisheries Division again, and Vernell Nichols of the Barbados National Union of Fisher Folk. I want to welcome you, gentlemen and ladies. The business of this committee has been conducted in a particular way, and I'm going to share that with you. Everyone who has come to give evidence has been given the opportunity, if they care to, up front, to say a few words, if you care to, which will kind of shape or share with us your thinking on the merits or the demerits of this proposed piece of legislation. I will probably exercise my discretion as chairman up front to ask you a few questions, but what I try to do is to intervene for no more than about 5 minutes, and then I rotate across all the members of the committee present and participating so that everyone will have an opportunity to quiz you on any matters of concern. Obviously, all of you have a very particular connection to the fisheries sector, and the fisheries sector is a very important sector with respect to the vending in Barbados. So I want to begin by offering you the floor, Mr. Lewis. Welcome you, and if you care to, please indicate whether you would wish to say anything to the committee before any questions are asked of you.
All right, good morning, Minister Simmons, and good morning to the members of the committee. I think as well as good afternoon to one and all. I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for inviting me here, as well as my colleagues. I think that the vending bill is indeed timely in going through it. I found it to be fairly comprehensive and very, very straightforward. There are just some minor issues which I would like to address as we go along.
Okay, fair enough. Ms. Holder.
Good morning, sir. As Mr. Lewis said, I'm very thankful. We are very thankful to be invited here to be part of
Sorry, you may have to come closer to your microphone, please.
We are very thankful to be invited here to be part of this Vendors Committee bill. And as Mr. Lewis has said, we will address any issue as we go along.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Nichols.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, committee. Good afternoon, sorry. I want to express my gratitude also for giving the opportunity for being here. This is the first time that I would have found myself in such a forum, so I hope that everyone would bear with me and that I can represent the industry that I work with adequately, and that I would be able to answer the questions that were being asked by me. I'm happy to be a part of this committee looking over this bill, and I have some some notes that I would have made. Bill, I look forward to the discussions and would wait to see of me. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Nichols, your microphone is giving us a little bit of trouble, and I'm going to invite the technical people to come over there and just pay that some attention. But I want to assure you that there's nothing to be nervous about. We would not have known how to proceed without having the Barbados National Union of Fisherfolk participate in this. You all represent the bedrock of fisheries vending in Barbados, and frankly speaking, it is critical to everything that this committee is contemplating doing. I want to, while they pay some attention to your microphone, Ms. Nichols, I want to invite Mr. Lewis to you had indicated, sir, that there were one or two issues that you had. I'm presuming that these are issues that you have top of mind. Would you be willing to share with us?
Just some very minor issues,
right.
Minister. In terms of, I see the application form, a license for vendor's license. Mm-hmm. The first schedule, this on page 36.
Right.
And this is just from an administrative point of view. Could you also include a line on that which speaks to telephone numbers?
I'm trying to pull it up. Bear with me.
Okay.
I have with me, I should say to you, I have with me two policy advisors. There's Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch from my ministry. You know, I don't know if you know Anderson.
Hey, went to school with Anderson. we are Black Rock boys.
I thought as much, but I was not sure. I thought as much. And I have Ms. Shawnrain Bell, who is the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel. Uh-huh. I'm not sure if she's a Black Rock girl, but if there are any issues that we need any guidance with, they're there to help us. No, I have the first schedule in front of me. The first schedule of the bill is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Page 36.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would like to have, as it says here, name of applicant, sex, date of birth, national identification number, residential address, email address, and you would like to have the telephone number put in.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. That seems reasonable to me. I probably should ask you, are there any specific reasons why you wish to have the telephone number?
I think that, well, telephones nowadays are primarily the main mode of communication.
Okay.
And, you know, people nowadays use the various platforms like WhatsApp and that kind of thing. So it is easier to find people via telephone as opposed to going at the residential address or even email, which nowadays is kind of like snail mail.
I'm very glad that you've been given the opportunity to elaborate. And I say this lightly, but I am serious at the same time, because there are people listening out there who may want to know what is the area Lewis want to know the people telephone number for. You have now explained the importance of it. Okay. No challenge with that, Deputy Chief. Fine. Next thing, Mr. Lewis.
Page 22. Mm-hmm. Public markets and fish landing sites, clause 3.
Please, page 22, I'm with you there.
I'm going to read from clause 2 and enter into clause 3, which speaks to the senior manager of markets, which is my role, shall be responsible for the management and operation of a public market, that is a fish market.
Right.
But then it goes to clause 3 and it says the minister responsible for fisheries shall be responsible for the management and operation of a fish landing site. I want to know why the minister, as opposed to the chief fisheries officer, since the chief fisheries officer is the person right now who's in charge of fish landing sites. Was this?
Well, no, this is a very interesting point that you're making, because that had never been my understanding. Deputy Chief, is that, can you assist?
Chair, when we were having discussions in relation
Sorry, Mr. Lewis, would you be so good as to mute your mic? Is his mic?
Yeah.
Okay. We're good here now. Don't touch anything. We're good. Go ahead, Deputy Chief.
Yes, Chair, when we were having discussions in relation to who would be in charge of the fish landing sites, the discussions did yield that this that the functionary identified here should be put in this place. So this is a policy issue. If it is that someone else is better able to be in charge of the management and operation, then I am fine with it. It just means that there are some other consequential amendments that will have to be made to address this as well.
Okay.
That it's related to.
Okay. So, Mr. Lewis, your recommendation is that it would be, what is the correct title that you used just now?
The Chief Fisheries Officer.
Okay, so Mr. Lewis proposes then that the Chief Fisheries Officer should be responsible for Chief Fisheries Officer shall be responsible for the management and operation of a fish landing site.
That is what currently obtains.
Right, fair enough.
Right.
No desire to depart from that. Are there any other?
We speak of fish landing sites and we also speak of public markets. On page 55, part 3, you have a list of fish landing sites, and among the fish landing sites are also the fish markets. So I wanted to know if this heading couldn't be list of public markets and list of fish markets and fish landing sites, or have them separated.
Page 55, part 3.
Chair.
Yes, Deputy Chief Parliamentary
So
Counsel.
when in the meetings that we would have had with stakeholders, these were the specific list of fish landing sites, not fish market sites. So that is why they have that heading, and we got it straight from the ministry responsible for fisheries.
You understand what she's saying, Ms.
Could you repeat for me, please?
Chair.
She's saying that what is at part 3 are was first of all came from the ministry responsible for fisheries, and secondly represent what the ministry told her were the fish landing sites in Barbados, or the recognized fish landing sites in Barbados. As I understand it, you are saying to us that this is not just fish landing sites that we are seeing here, but these are also markets.
These are also fish markets.
And I could agree with you because I'm looking at Belinda Cox Fish Market at Oystons, and that has to be a market.
Yeah.
Clearly. The Bridgetown Complex is also a market.
Uh-huh.
Is it also a fish landing site?
It is not categorized as a fish landing site in the true sense of the word, because if in this bill we are speaking about public markets and we refer to public markets as fish markets in one instance, and then we are talking about fish landing sites, then we cannot have all lumped together under one heading as fish landing sites.
It would appear to me that you're making abundance of good sense. So in as much as the legislation is drawing a distinction between the fish market and the fish landing site, what we should be doing is to go through, let us then go through the Deputy Chief, the proposal I have would be that we go through the list here at part 3 of the bill and pull out those that are properly better described as markets. Could we do that?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, then I'm in your hands because you know this better than me. In fact, when you get down by Colorado Bay, you gotta teach me a little bit about where to find that. But go ahead.
In terms of the fish markets, you would have Belinda Cox Fish Market.
All right.
You have Bridgetown Complex, but I think the correct name is not Bridgetown Public Market.
Okay. So that will come out too.
Yes, as a fish market.
Right.
There's also the Concept Bay Fish Market.
No, just for the avoidance of doubt. There's a fish market at Concept Bay and also a landing site, or there's just...
No, it's just a fish market.
Okay, fine.
Paynes Bay Fish Market.
Point well made.
Spikestown Fish Market.
Mm-hmm.
Tank Bay Fish Market.
Mm-hmm.
Pile Bay is still a landing site and has not been handed over to the Markets Division as yet, so that is still listed as a
But
land site.
pause there. Is there not a market that had just been built there? Pile Bay?
It is still listed as a landing site.
Oh, but okay.
So it is not under the management of Markets Division.
They're properly managed. Pile Bay is still a landing site managed by fisheries and not by markets, even though there is a market on the site.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay.
That is your minister, Mr. Lewis, but I know you're a man that will not get nervous about that. You keep talking.
You're talking to a man who's put on a dress and go up on stage, man. Behave. Right. So that is basically it from but a question I wanted to ask though. In the bill, it speaks to relocation of people. If I'm guessing, if the minister or if the ministries or various units decide to relocate a person, what happens if some person wants to
pause a little bit. Hold there, as they would say in the old war pictures. Keep your gunpowder dry. I have.
Young people will say slow your roll.
Well, there you go. Look, I have a question that embarrasses me to have to ask you this, but for the benefit of some people who are taking a record in this house, there is a request that you give the addresses. I thought that we all knew Barbados well enough that we all knew the addresses, but that apparently is not so. So therefore,
the addresses of
the markets.
Okay.
Some I would have thought would be self-explanatory. Barinda Cox Fish Market, for example, is at Oyston
Praise Church.
Right. Good. The other ones?
The
Bridgetown Complex is
Bridgetown Complex or Bridgetown Public Market is on Princess Alice Highway.
Right.
Concept Bay Fish Market is in Concept Bay, St. John.
Right. I don't go any further because they would say that I didn't know, so let me just say PSB is in St. James.
Paynes Bay, correct, is in Paynes Bay. Spikestown Fish Market is in Spikestown, St. Peter. And one that you have here listed as Western, which slipped me just now, that is the Millie Eiffel Fish Market.
Correct.
And that's located also in St. James. Tank Bay is in St. Joseph.
All right. Now, I am curious because I know the market does not function anymore, but how do you define the Fitzvillage arrangement? Because it was a market at one point.
It was a landing site. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. Okay. So you just treat it then it's a landing site?
It's a landing site, yeah.
Okay.
So like I just told you, Western, which you have here, what you have here listed as Western, is the Millie Eiffel Fish Market. That's in St. James.
Okay. Now, Deputy Chief, do you have any challenges with that?
Chair, no.
No? Okay. Hold on a second. Again, for the avoidance of doubt, you're being invited then to indicate the addresses of some of the fish landing sites which are not well known. You have, for example, the one I asked you about, Cholera Bay. Where is that, please? That's number 11 on what I have here, page 56.
Fish landing sites fall under the jurisdiction of the Chief Fisheries Officer. I myself am not even sure where some of these fish landing sites are.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, then we won't detain the business of the committee with uncertainties. Minister Humphrey?
Yes, sir. I was just saying, I have spoken to the Chief Fisheries Officer, haven't spoken to the Deputy CPC at the time when she'd inquired about the fish landing sites. So this information came from the Chief Fisheries Officer. what it could do for the committee's benefit is to have the addresses of all of these sites made available by the end of the day, sir.
Okay, I'll be grateful. Much obliged. Mr. Lewis, please proceed then. Before I interrupted you, you were...
Yeah, I was asking a question because I noticed there is provision in here for relocation, and it seems as though it speaks to if the various ministries or departments have to relocate people. But if persons want to relocate themselves, for instance, in fish markets, we have, as you can see, we have about 7 fish markets. And if a person wants to relocate from Bridgetown to Tank Bay, for instance, would that person have to reapply for a fresh vending license to vend in that particular area? Or is there some kind of transitional approach to it where we can, from within our own department, if we can deal with that ourselves?
Deputy Chief?
Yes. Chair, could you please
Ask him to restate the question.
Yes.
Eric, you're being asked to restate the question.
Okay, let's say, for instance, let me try to break it down. If a vendor has a license to vend at the Bridgetown Public Market, and he or she wants to relocate to Tank Bay Fish Market, would that person have to apply for a new vending license to operate at Tank Bay Fish Market?
Chair, the part of the bill that deals with relocation and eviction, those are basically more non-voluntary type mechanisms. They don't deal with where the person may want to apply to relocate.
Does that satisfy you, Mr. Lewis?
I understand that part. I understand that area speaks to non-voluntary. But I wanted to know if the person wanted to relocate, if it is something then that we would have to do from...
In other words, if you have a lady in Paynes Bay Market and she decides that she don't want to be in Paynes Bay anymore because really and truly she only went there for a little bit of time and she really don't come from St. James. She really is a St. George woman and now living in the city. And so she would prefer to be operating from in the city. Does that require a fresh license?
And her license already states that she is to vend at Paynes Bay.
Right. How is that treated to? That is his question.
Yes. So, Chair, a mechanism will have to be put in place to deal with that specifically.
Okay, so the Chief Parliamentary Counsel is saying that we would have to create a mechanism to deal with that transition specifically. So I think that you may have pointed us, sir, to a little bit of a oversight in the bill, in the legislation. As the lawyers would say, a lacuna in the legislation. Yeah?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Understood.
So we will in these circumstances, what I would recommend is that the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel will fashion a form of language that will respond to the issue that you've directed us to. Okay, so you can then now raise any other issues that you had in mind.
That's it from me for the time being. Thanks.
Okay, I'm thankful. Now, Ms. Holder, you also said that you had one or two in your mind. So before I open the floor to others, do you want to elaborate any further on any issues that you had?
Sir, the ones I will have asked Mr. Lewis, I've already asked those questions, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you, ma'am. Colleagues, the floor is open to anyone who may wish to question the guests that we have.
Sure.
Minister Ford.
I just want to welcome Mr. Lewis and his entire crew. I see my Minister colleague online, Minister Humphrey, and I don't wish to preempt that which she may come in and ask about, but there was a question which took up piece of his gray matter last time we were here. That was Wednesday. And it dealt with and I know, Mr. Lewis, you will not be befuddled with this question. I am sure that, and I know you like to use the Barbadian vernacular. I am sure that you are not tipsy as we speak. But I would like to ask you, because the question really emanates from the consumption of alcohol and your take as it relates to Section 18, which deals with the consumption of alcohol, where vending is concerned. And what is your take as a person who would have worked in market fraternity for most of your life, and understanding the environs which you operate under and the environment? What is your take on the consumption of alcohol? Because as I speak, we have a policy where we are not allowing the consumption of alcohol. This was a debate that took up the fullness of time last time we spent our eyes on Section 18. So I would like your take on that.
Section 18, what page is that on?
That's page 24.
Page 24.
24E, 18E.
Mr. Lewis, do not be misled by Minister Ford, who should know better and who does know better. You were quite right all along when you were saying clause 18. Don't let people put wrong things in your head, please.
Okay, all right. 18E, it says not while vending. That's correct, right?
Yes.
So I gather from this that if you are a person who is selling, then you should not be consuming or under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Or if not while vending, sell. That is a little bit contradictory for me, because in one breath you're saying if you are not, when you're saying not while vending, you're not allowed to sell.
Not allowed to sell, serve, or distribute alcohol without
an appropriate liquor license.
Right.
So what was the main issue?
I'm talking about the consumption. Your minister, well, he's here on the line, and he could vocalize much better than myself.
He's saying that what? That persons in market should not drink alcohol, sell alcohol?
The question being asked is, what is your take on the fact that while vending, while you are selling your fish or whatever, cutting up fish, you should not be drinking alcohol while doing that?
But it speaks to also to a hygiene and sanitary measure. I think Ms. Waller might be able to speak more about that, but I think that when you're selling fish, you're selling fish. You shouldn't be. I don't think you're allowed to be eating and selling fish at the same time.
Ms. Holder, you wish to share a view on this matter? Or you, Ms. Nichols?
As far as I'm concerned, sir, there's no alcohol supposed to be consumed in fish markets.
And I think that so that we do not spend too much time going down that rabbit hole any further, I'm going to invite the Deputy Parliamentary Counsel to share with me the fruits of the research that has been done on this matter, because the committee had been misled. In robust language, we were given the assurance that there is no law. I remember hearing that. I can't remember who said it, but I remember hearing it. But the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel has been of tremendous assistance to me, and I will invite her to share with us the law. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Chair, in relation to the markets and slaughterhouses regulations, Regulation 18, and I will just cite the relevant part. No person in any public market shall curse, swear, or use any indecent or obscene or blasphemous language. And then in relation to the alcohol, no person in any public market shall consume, sell, or otherwise dispose of any intoxicating liquor. And then it's in the Regulation 18.2, it says if any persons contravenes any of the provisions of this regulation, including one, then he shall be guilty of an offense and liable to a fine not exceeding $25. Of course, in our conversation, sir, I have indicated that having heard the submissions from Barven, it is clear that the regulation of vending should not only address the way that persons are licensed or given a permit, but also the way that they are treated within their circumstances. And so therefore this should be something that should be subject to admin penalties as well. And so the bill will be made to reflect those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think that should put to rest any issues about what the legal situation is in Barbados as we speak. It is an offense under the legislation to consume or be under the influence of alcohol. And what we will try to do now, or what we must do now, is to make sure that we remove the criminalization of persons from that legislation. And as you all know, the intention of this committee is to just make sure that we complete the purpose of the legislation. The purpose of the legislation includes decriminalization of vending and any activities related to vending. And so therefore, if somebody now was to consume or be under the influence of alcohol while in the business of vending, what would happen is that you would be liable to pay an administrative penalty. Now, I don't know, Mr. Lewis, if you've had a chance to look at that part of the legislation. And in this regard, Ms. Nichols, you represent the union, and I wanted to quiz you a little bit on that. I recognize that Senator Wiggins has her hand up, but before I come to you, Senator Wiggins, I just wanted to give these folks an opportunity to speak to us on the question of the penalty, the penalties that are being contemplated. Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, just refresh my memory as to where I find them in the schedule. What?
Chair, just trying to pick up where you're...
I seem to remember it's the 6th schedule, if I remember correctly. 5th? Oh, shoot.
The admin penalty is...
Yeah.
Okay. So, Chair, it is 7th schedule, right. Page 67.
Page 67. So if you all looked at page 67, the question then is, do you have, and I wanted to just get from you a sense of whether you felt that these were reasonable penalties laid out here. Obviously, before you go, what the Chief Parliamentary Counsel just spoke to with respect to drinking is not included here, because we only recently found that. We had to go and search about after that became an issue in the committee. But now that we found that piece of law, that will be included too. But there's a need to just get your view on this aspect of it. Do you feel that the contraventions outlined and the penalties that may be paid are reasonable? And please feel free to say, if unreasonable, why so?
Minister, sir, for me, as far as the penalties are concerned, truth is, with this bill, and because I am not aware of how the system works here, I thought that I would have had an opportunity to go through this or to speak to the fisher folk. And because I have not had an opportunity to speak to or go through this with them, I don't think that I have the capacity to make a decision as to whether I think it is fair or not. So I would not want to say that I think it is okay as far as the fees are concerned.
Mm-hmm. Understood. I understand that, because you really would like to consult with your constituents.
Yes, because I have over 6,000 people to deal with,
And I live that reality every day, so I know what you're going through.
So I wouldn't want to sit here and say, yes, I think it is okay, and I agree with it, but I understand that penalties have to come and breach of laws. So I don't know with this bill if I would be given an opportunity to come back, or if the move will be made to go ahead with what it is that would be done eventually. But basically for me, I wouldn't want to make that, because some of them seems quite steep to me. And as a vendor myself, I would want to pay $1,500 for some of them. But what one of the things that I noted in my records was that the 14 days, I thought that was not adequate time for persons to pay fees to a penalty. And I was wondering if that could move to at least 30 days, because I know that some people think that we make a lot of money, but sometimes with this 1,500, really, it would take some time for persons to come up with the money or to pay in part. But that was one of my notes on it. I think that the time frame could be moved from 14 days to at least 30 days.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nichols. And I want you not to let your heart be troubled. You are quite welcome to come back. We will endeavor to have another session during the course of next week where we can have you address us on this matter. But I note your observation with respect to the 30 days, and that actually saves me from having to ask you the next question I was going to ask you, because I really was also concerned about your views on the 14-day period within which to pay. So if you would be so good as to try to consult a representative element of the 6,000 that you have to answer to, and to do so as soon as possible. We're bound to get back to you early in next week. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
No problem there. Now, Senator Althea Wiggins had her hand up. She wants to ask you all some questions, and equally, Minister of Tourism Lisa Cummins wants to ask you all some questions. So I am going to go to Senator Wiggins first because she caught my eye first. Senator Wiggins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Notwithstanding Section 18(1)(f), I just had a concern in these COVID times. I visit the fish market in my vicinity very often, and one of my concerns was that you're selling fish and taking the money in the same hand. I was wondering, in terms of hygiene, if, as I said, notwithstanding Section 18(1)(f), if there was a way, Ms. Nichols, where you can have one person who's dealing exclusively with the fish and then have another person taking the money. Because if it is a situation where the same person has to carry out both functions, I would think that the person should sanitize their hands after each and every transaction, because I believe that this is not only because it's COVID, but it's a good hygienic practice. What do you have to say to that, ma'am? Ms. Nichols?
Thank you. I think it is a fair statement or a fair question. Right now we are going through I don't remember it, but the health bill. We are going through some other bills, the health bill, also with the Ministry of Health, and we are looking at ways that we can bridge the gaps in some of these things that we are doing. We've had training with a lot of our fisher folk, and I think that in the meetings that I would be setting up with them soon to deal with these matters, these are some of the things that I will take note of, and between myself and them, we could look at ways to deal with this same problem you're speaking about. I know that there are some persons who have multiple persons working for them, that it might be feasible for them to do it, but then there are those that operate as a single individual. And as you said, these are things that will have to be brought to their attention in order to make these necessary changes that we are discussing. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Cummins, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I did have one question perhaps for the representative of Barnufo, and then I had a question for the Deputy CPC. I wanted to, perhaps I could start with the Deputy CPC on page 67, where we have occasional vending without a permit, contrary to section 11.1. There is not actually a penalty, at least not in the version that I am seeing in front of me. Is that intentionally left blank, or is there meant to be a number in there? That's on page 67 of the 7th schedule. Page 67. Page 67, under the 7th schedule, part 1, administrative penalties, where it says occasional vending without a permit, contrary to section 11.1, and the provision is specifically section 11.6, and then under penalty, the area is left blank. So I just wanted to get clarification on if that was intentional or if there is supposed to be an insertion in there.
Chair, just to say there probably should, well, there should be an insertion. So I will have to look back into earlier drafts to see what should be there. Thank you.
I'm obliged to you, Minister Cummins, because that had eluded me. I didn't realize that provision was blank.
Thank you, Chair.
You had the second question.
I did. It was specific, perhaps more of a combination of a comment to you, Chair, and perhaps a query to the representative from Barnufo. Now, I agree that the penalties in here could potentially be imposing and may appear to be steep, but I think perhaps we may have to hopefully have in those consultations with the fisher folk that you represent as your constituent base, and obviously in collaboration with the ministry and hopefully with the committee, we will have to, if these penalties by definition as penalties are within everyone's reach and they're too comfortable, then they're not a penalty. A penalty is meant to serve as a disincentive to persons from vending without a permit contrary to section 1, vending without a permit, vending on a license that has been suspended or revoked. And so I'm hopeful that in the consultations that they come back, that we're able to find that balance between creating that disincentive to people from doing the wrong thing on the one hand, and at the same time being fair to persons who, as you have said, people may think are making a lot of money, but that's not always the case. But that may be really the reason for which you are being penalized, because you're being incentivized to do the right thing so you don't have to pull your pocket. That's my comment, and just perhaps to get a reaction from the rep from Barnufo.
Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I do agree with you as it relates to the penalty, but I am not, my meeting with them is not necessarily to say that, you know, we don't want a penalty, but because I have not spoken with them, as I said earlier, I can't make the decision as to whether it is okay with them. And as you said about finding the balance between the penalty and what is fair to them, my reason for meeting with them is just to go through with them, to go through it with them, have the discussions, and for them to be aware of what is coming in these new laws that we are discussing. You know, because you don't want to appear that I come here and I agree to things and, you know, the first thing they will say, well, but you haven't spoken to us about them. So my reason for speaking with them is not necessarily to say we don't want a penalty, but for us to be on the page that there is something happening, there is something coming, and these are the things that are coming and the reaction from them, that I can bring it back here. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may though respond.
Sorry, go ahead, Minister.
I wouldn't want to give Ms. Nichols and the representatives from Barnufo the impression at all that that is what I'm expecting. I believe that Barnufo is a an association that has distinguished itself over many years. And as you would know quite well, Chairman, Barnufo played an integral role in complex and detailed matters such as maritime boundaries, delimitation, arbitration between Barbados and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and others. So Barnufo is not necessarily a light thing at all. And I have every confidence that the representative of Barnufo here today, in Ms. Nichols, is well equipped for the task, and that her membership that she represents have a long tradition of participating in public policy development. The point that I'm making here, however, is that I did not want for us to have consultations, which are critical and important by the constituent base, that did not give them the opportunity to go through in context each of the provisions laid out in the legislation, not so that they could know what is coming down the pipeline, so that they have an opportunity to weigh in and, where possible, make recommendations for changes. And specifically in this instance, on the question of what is contained in the 7th schedule on page 67, whether or not, as the entity that is going to be enforcing much of this among its membership, if, in their view, the balance between enforcing the regulations and policing and having self-policing can be struck along with fairness and what is manageable at the same time, without creating an environment where a fine is so reachable that people don't have any basis on which the regulations themselves can be enforced, because they're paid and move on. So I think that's just a balance. But I have every confidence, Ms. Nichols, in your leadership and that of the membership base of Barnufo.
Okay, thank you.
Minister, just to reply, a short reply.
Yes, ma'am.
I want it just to be noted here that in any sector or any area of the society, you would always get persons who are agreeable and disagreeable to most of any laws or rules that are coming. And I must say that we do have persons in this fishing industry who I'm certain that this bill, they will be glad to see some of these things being enforced, because like myself, we are looking for a better fishing industry. We are looking for a fishing industry where persons and of the particular industry and society come to see it as an industry that is, viable to the country, and that it is an industry that we ourselves must first respect ourselves and then be respected by members of the public. So I'm certain that persons in the industry will be quite willing to go through this bill, and we will come to a consensus on striking a balance. Thank you.
Ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And I want to give you the assurance that even though you were not present, the representative of Barvin spoke with us on the last time that we met, and the tone that they struck was very similar to that which you have just shared with us. So I pick up your sense of responsibility, and I'm sure that you will get back to us with the spirit of what your constituents have to say on this particular matter. But to give you the personal assurance, my mind has already been going in the direction of whether the 14 days to pay had been too short. In fact, with Barvin, we had floated the idea of payment by installment. They did not feel that that was necessary, but your suggestion of 30 days resonates with me, and I have a red pen here in my hand, and I have noted it in red so as to make sure that I don't lose track of the suggestion. But I will wait for you to come back before we go any further on that point. Minister Ford, you wanted the floor.
Yes, I certainly would not like to dilute the efforts of Ms. Nichols, and I want to thank her because she says that she represents 6,000 or so, and it brings my mind and dates my mind back to the book of John when Jesus brought the bread and the fish and fed about 5,000. So we understand the importance of having fish around and the nutritional value of it. I want to thank the minister personally for his work in terms of providing that phytosanitary environment for fisher folk, the pristine markets that we see around. We went as far as utilizing the 70% waste and fish offal to be able to augment the agricultural sector, and that's a new program he has started as well. I share your concern, Ms. Nichols, as it relates to the fees. That is certainly something that we, as the chair rightly alluded to, we can look at and rethink. But I just want your take equally on, since I list a whole set of improvements that have brought a different look in terms of the commercial enterprise that you're involved in. I want to hear from you, what is your take on the fees being paid for rental of space by your fisher folk?
Sorry. Right now we are paying 75 cents a day. And I would not sit here and say that 75 cents a day is adequate for a fee. I've noted and spoken to the minister in many of my speeches and directly that we are quite grateful and we are happy to see the upgrades that are being done in the fishery sector, in the fishing industry. And in my last speech, I also noted things that we are hoping we can get finished. So I would not say that the fee right now, in terms, especially for the vendors, that is adequate. But in listening to some of the concerns, I'm not certain markets would really be the persons who have to speak to the fee as it relates to the fishermen. Because I know that the fishermen, they themselves don't think that it is really fair either for us to be paying the 75 cents, and that they are the persons who usually pay most of the fee in terms of landings. I'm not certain what the fee is for them, but I wouldn't say that 75 cents is adequate for the type of work that is going on, the upgrades, and for what we are doing. So I would be fair to say that the fish folk can pay a bit more money.
Mrs. Nichols, I'm going to intervene right now. I'm going to intervene at this point because I know that you have to talk to constituents, and I don't want you to compromise anything that you say to your constituents or they say to you by going any further down this wicket of fees and payments and so on. I hear what you're...
Chair, sorry, before you move off, may I just very quickly on the matter raised by Minister Ford. I know you're trying to save for now, but I don't think you need to in this instance, because prior to COVID, we had actually started having conversations with the fisher folk across the market. Mm-hmm. And it was their suggestion, not mine, that we actually should raise the fees. In fact, the bulk of the fisher folk who spoke to me had indicated that they thought the 75 cents was too little. So we had already garnered some support for an increase in fees. So I don't think Ms. Nichols finds herself in fiery circumstances. But the truth is the fisher folk had already agreed, but COVID caused us in the ministry to rethink the increase in fees at the time. So I do support the point raised by Ms. Nichols, and it's something that we had campaigned on the idea before in the market. We'd actually taken almost a briefing on it in its entirety. And at some point in the future, I think any right-thinking person would appreciate that at 75 cents a day in the market, where we provide space, we've upgraded the facilities, we provide full use of water, and our water bills are extremely high, that at some point we're going to have to relook the 75 cents. But it would not be done without conversation and without some general consensus on the matter. So.
Fine. Thank you very much, Minister.
Chair, and to add context to what the Minister just said and what Ms. Nichols also added, in 1989, we had people at the Bridgetown Market paying $4 and $5 to use the markets. But then an audit was done, and it was determined that there wasn't anything in the schedule to charge for $5, so it went back down to 75 cents. But if you can imagine that 32 years ago, people were paying $4 and $5, we are now in 2021, and people still paying 75 cents. You know that we have not done anything really.
And I, for the second time today, I have to thank you as a public servant for giving us context, because very often we as legislators are placed at a disadvantage where we come well-intentioned to this place but do not necessarily have at our fingertips the kind of background and information and context that you are now offering. Mr. Lewis, I want to take you to part 4, page 21 of the bill, which just enumerates the areas that we propose to have as vending zones. One of them are fish landing sites. Now, I want you to offer us a little bit of an insight on this matter. In your judgment, the fish landing sites, if they are to be vending zones, are you satisfied with their condition and quality right now? And if not, what would be some of the things that you would want to see with respect to the fish landing sites in order to make them more hospitable for the purposes of vending?
I am not really familiar with a lot of the fish landing sites. I know that the minister has said that he's going to do some work with a few of them. I think Half Moon Port is one, and I can't remember the other one that he said he was looking at. I think Martinsville as well. Bernard, you want to speak to that one?
Right. Yes, Minister. I work a lot with SPS in the region. And I saw from some of my traveling different activities in different places.
No, Vernell, let me interrupt you, please, Vernell, because you see this is what Minister Cummings was saying. You represent a body that is very sophisticated. A lot of Barbadians don't appreciate that. Help us, because some in here may not know what SPS is, please.
Sorry. It's sanitary and phytosanitary standards.
Yes, good.
And my focus, or my area of focus, is the handling practices regarding the fish, how fish is stored, how it is handled from the boat to the bins where they are stored, how persons handle them after they're born and packaged and sent to the freezer. And we have had a lot of training with the fisher folks in this area. As it relates to the guys vending at the side of the road, I was thinking that I myself see some of the things that happen at the side of the road that really doesn't speaks well for sanitary and phytosanitary standards. But I was thinking that maybe first we can meet with them, but from my thinking, we can look at some insulated boxes, things that are removable from the road, because most of these guys sell what we call pot fish. So they're not there a whole day as like us in the markets. So they come in early, like maybe 11 o'clock, and they sell their fish, and they're off the road sometimes by 12:1. But I think that we can look at some insulated boxes for them, boxes that can hold ice, boxes that are on like a stand that they won't have to be bending down in some areas that I see some people to get the fish from the boxes. But we can look at building some insulated boxes that can hold ice, that can have some of that, the Perspex glass on top of them with ice, that when persons pass, they can still see the fish, but the fish is held in the ice until they are sold, and when they are leaving, they remove those boxes with them.
Okay. Are there any other observations you would want to make about the fish landing sites before I go further?
Well, I was asking Mr. Lewis earlier about Half Moon Fort and what are the plans for down there. And, you know, I'm happy that some upgrade is being done, especially I'm really happy about Pile Bay. And we have Martins Bay is another area that really needs to be developed. Because if we are talking about food hygiene and standards, those are the areas that we have to focus on. And in some cases, they don't really look wholesome, and we need to address them.
Okay. Now, we are going to shortly be at lunch, but I'm going to, and I want to invite you all to join us for lunch, please. And when we come back after lunch, which will be 45 minutes or well, maybe 50 minutes from now, we will continue this questioning. But what I wanted to do before we started lunch is to just share with you where my mind is at as we go forward. The Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, who you heard speaking just now, has, as I said, done some research with respect to the regulations that govern vending in markets in Barbados. And a lot of these regulations have given rise to criminal penalties or criminal sanctions. What we're trying to do, as I keep saying, is to decriminalize the process, so that there are a few of them that I want to discuss with you all after lunch. And what I'm going to be trying to do is just to get from you an understanding of what is happening now, in similar way that we just had a conversation about the use of alcohol, and where we can go in the future as we try to modernize and bring this business into the 21st century, but equally how we can get around the question of criminal penalties. So that is where I wish to go immediately after lunch. Are all three of you in a position to join us after lunch?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, I will then, it being now 1:10, colleagues, I would ask that we adjourn until 2 o'clock and then continue the interview with those guests that we have here now. Are we expecting any more this afternoon?
Excuse me, Minister, before we break quickly.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes, I didn't really get a chance to speak to the issue of licensing.
You will. You will.
Okay, you come back to me on that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
In fact, if you have a few things there, if you have a list there of things you want to talk to us about, you just make a note of it if it isn't already written down so you don't forget, and I'm happy to hear you.
Thank you.
You're here to help us, so we need to hear you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Now, can I have a motion then, please, that we take the luncheon interval now and that we return at 2 o'clock, that we suspend now and come back for 2 o'clock, please.
Motion to suspend to return at 2.
Moved by Minister Ford, seconded by Minister Goodin-Edgell. God bless you, sir. Thank you. Colleagues, we stand suspended until 2 p.m.